The dust came without warning. One moment I was walking alongside our wagon, watching the red Arizona rocks shimmer in the afternoon heat, and the next moment the world turned brown. The wind hit like a physical blow, tearing my bonnet from my head and filling my mouth with grit before I could even cry out. "Papa!" I screamed, but the wind swallowed my voice. I could barely see the wagon anymore, just a dark shape in the swirling chaos. I stumbled forward, my hands stretched out, trying to reach the tailboard where I'd been walking just seconds before. My boot caught on a rock and I went down hard, my palms scraping against stone. When I looked up, coughing and spitting sand, the wagon was gone. Everything was gone except the howling wind and the suffocating curtain of dust that turned day into twilight. "Papa! Mama!" I screamed again, crawling forward on my hands and knees. The wind was so strong I couldn't stand. Tears streamed down my face, cutting tracks through the dust, caking my cheeks. "Thomas! Anyone!" But there was no answer except the wind's shriek. I don't know how long I crouched there in the storm. It felt like hours, though it might have been only minutes. My throat was raw from screaming and breathing in dust. My eyes burned. Every exposed inch of skin felt like it was being scoured away by the sand. Finally, I managed to crawl behind a large boulder that broke the worst of the wind. I huddled there, my arms wrapped around my knees, my face pressed against my skirt, trying to breathe through the fabric. The roar of the storm was deafening. "Please, God," I prayed. "Let them find me. Let this storm pass. Let me see my family again." I thought of my mother's face that morning, how she'd smiled at me while we prepared breakfast over the campfire, my father's reassuring hand on my shoulder as we'd started the day's journey, my younger brother Thomas, just 16, who'd been driving the wagon while Papa walked ahead to scout the trail. We'd left Missouri 4 months ago, joining a wagon train headed for California. 42 wagons when we started, 31 by the time we crossed into Arizona territory. Disease, accidents, and one terrible river crossing had claimed the rest, but our family had stayed together. We'd been careful, we'd been lucky, until today. The storm raged on. My water canteen was still hanging from the wagon. I had nothing. No food, no water, no blanket. Just the clothes on my back, a simple brown calico dress already torn at the hem from my fall, and my worn leather boots. Even my bonnet was gone, torn away in the first gust of wind. I reached up to touch my hair, my one vanity, the color my mother called honey wheat, now matted with dust and hanging loose from its pins. At 23, I was considered old for an unmarried woman. Most of the girls I'd known back in Missouri had married at 18 or 19, but I'd wanted to see California first, to have an adventure before settling into the life of a farmer's wife. Some adventure this was turning out to be. As the light began to fade, or maybe that was just the dust growing thicker, I realized I was going to have to spend the night here. The thought terrified me. I'd heard the stories around the campfire. Mountain lions, rattlesnakes, and worse, Apache raiders who took captives and were never seen again. Mr. Henderson, one of the men in our train, had lost his brother to an Apache raid 5 years ago in New Mexico territory. He'd told the story so many times I could recite it by heart. The warning was always the same. If you see an Apache, you run. If you can't run, you pray. I pressed myself tighter against the boulder and tried not to think about it. Sometime during the night, the storm finally died. The wind's howl gradually faded to a whisper, then to nothing. The dust settled. When I finally lifted my head, the stars were out. Thousands of them, more than I'd ever seen, spread across the black sky like diamonds on velvet. I'd never felt so alone in my life. I stood slowly, my legs stiff and aching. Every muscle hurt. My throat was so dry I could barely swallow. In the starlight, I could see the landscape around me, endless rock formations, scattered brush, and distant mesas. But no wagon train, no campfire, no sign of human presence at all. Which way had I come? Which way should I go? I tried to remember what Papa had taught me about navigation. Find the North Star. But knowing which way was north didn't help when I didn't know which direction the wagon train had gone. Had they continued on their route? Had they stopped to search for me? Were they east, west, north, or south of where I stood? I decided to wait for dawn. At least then I might see smoke from their breakfast fires, or spot wagon tracks in the dirt. I sat back down against the boulder, wrapped my arms around myself for warmth, and waited. The desert night was cold, so cold after the day's heat that my teeth chattered. My dress provided almost no protection. I thought about my wool shawl, left folded in the wagon, my blanket, the warm jacket Mama had sewn for me. Stop it, I told myself firmly. Feeling sorry for yourself won't help. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, and another answered. I pressed closer to my boulder. When dawn finally came, it came suddenly. One moment the sky was black, the next it was gray. and then suddenly the sun burst over the eastern horizon like a beacon of hope. I stood immediately, shading my eyes, searching in every direction for some sign of the wagon train. Nothing, just rocks and brush and the vast, empty sky. I knew I had to find water. That was the most important thing. I could survive days without food, but in this heat, without water, I'd be dead by tomorrow. I remembered Papa saying that in desert country, you follow the birds and insects. They'll lead you to water. I saw a raven circling to the northwest and decided to follow it. The walking was brutal. The sun climbed higher, turning the world into an oven. My dress clung to me with sweat. My feet, already sore from yesterday's walking before the storm, now screamed with every step. I was fairly certain I had blisters forming, but I didn't dare stop to check. I had to keep moving, had to find water. The raven disappeared, but I kept going in the same direction. What else could I do? Around midday, when the sun was directly overhead and the heat was at its worst, I saw it. A narrow cleft in the rocks ahead and something that looked like green. Real green, not the gray green of desert brush, but the deep emerald of well-watered plants. Water. I stumbled forward, almost running despite my exhaustion. The cleft in the rocks was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but I could hear it now, the most beautiful sound in the world. Running water. I pushed through the narrow opening, scraping my shoulders on the rock walls, and emerged into a place that took my breath away. It was a hidden canyon, completely enclosed by high red rock walls. A spring bubbled up from the ground in the center, forming a clear pool before flowing away into a crack in the rocks. Trees grew here, actual trees, with real shade. Grass covered the ground. Birds sang. After the harsh desert, it was like stumbling into Eden. I ran to the pool and fell to my knees, plunging my hands into the water. It was cold and clear and perfect. I drank and drank, not caring that I was soaking the front of my dress, not caring about anything except the blessed relief of water. When I finally sat back, gasping, I looked around more carefully. The canyon was perhaps 50 yards across, enclosed on all sides by sheer rock walls that had to be at least 80 feet high. The only way in or out appeared to be the narrow cleft I'd come through. It felt protected, safe. And then I noticed the markings on the rocks. Paintings in red and white and black, spirals and handprints and symbols I didn't recognize. They were everywhere, covering the walls of the canyon like a vast outdoor church. Some looked ancient, faded by time. Others looked newer. My blood ran cold. This was an Apache place. It had to be. No white person had ever been here. The paintings made that clear. This was a sacred place, a hidden place, the kind of place Mr. Henderson had warned us about in his stories. I should leave. I should leave right now. But I was so tired, so thirsty still, and the next water might be miles away. Water I might never reach. I'll just rest for an hour, I told myself, just long enough to recover my strength. Then I'll go. I found a shady spot under one of the trees and lay down on the grass, just for an hour, just to rest. I was asleep in minutes. When I woke, the sun had moved considerably. It was afternoon now. I'd slept far longer than an hour. I sat up quickly, angry at myself for wasting time, and that's when I saw him. An Apache warrior stood at the entrance to the canyon, not 20 feet away, staring directly at me. My heart stopped. For a long moment, we both simply stared at each other. He was young, perhaps close to my own age, with long black hair tied back and skin the color of copper. He wore leather leggings and moccasins, a cloth shirt, and had a rifle slung across his back. His dark eyes were wide with what looked like shock. Behind him, I could hear voices, more of them coming. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. Run, Mr. Henderson's voice in my head. If you see an Apache, you run. But there was nowhere to run. The narrow cleft was behind the warrior, and the canyon walls were impossible to climb. I was trapped. The warrior said something in Apache, words I couldn't understand, and suddenly there were more of them. 5, 6, 7 warriors emerged from the cleft into the canyon. They all stopped when they saw me, their faces registering the same shock as the first warrior. One of the older warriors said something sharp, his hand going to the knife at his belt. But the young warrior who'd seen me first held up a hand, stopping him. He said something else, and I heard one word that I recognized, not because I spoke Apache, but because I'd heard it whispered around campfires with fear and reverence. Naiche. Was that his name? Or was he calling for someone named Naiche? The warriors were arguing now, their voices rising. The older one kept pointing at me and then at the cleft, clearly wanting to do something. Kill me, drive me out, I couldn't tell which. But the young warrior kept shaking his head, saying the same words over and over. And then an 8th man emerged from the cleft, and everyone fell silent. He was clearly a chief. I could tell from the way the others stepped back to make room for him, from the beadwork on his clothing, from the eagle feather in his hair. He was tall and powerfully built, perhaps in his mid-20s, with a face that might have been carved from stone. His eyes were the darkest I'd ever seen, and when they fixed on me, I felt like I couldn't breathe. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then he spoke, not in Apache, but in English. Halting English, with a heavy accent, but English nonetheless. "You should not be here," he said. I found my voice somehow. "I know, I'm sorry. I was lost. The storm, my family, I just needed water. I'll leave. I'll leave right now." I took a step toward the cleft, but 3 warriors immediately moved to block my path. I stopped, my hands raised. The chief, Naiche, I was sure of it now, said something sharp in Apache. The warriors didn't move. He said it again, more forcefully, and reluctantly they stepped aside. But he held up a hand to stop me. "Wait." He walked toward me slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. I forced myself to stand still, though every instinct screamed at me to run. When he was just a few feet away, he reached out, not toward me, but toward my hair. He touched a strand that had fallen across my shoulder, rubbing it between his fingers as if testing its texture. Then he said something in Apache that made all the other warriors gasp. "You are the one," he said to me in English. "The prophecy spoke of you." "I don't understand," I whispered. His dark eyes searched my face. "Hair like autumn wheat," he said, "coming from the desert when the dust walks. You are the woman who will unite 2 peoples." "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, you're mistaken. I'm just Sarah Mitchell from Missouri. I'm nobody. I was just lost, and I found your canyon by accident, and I'm so sorry. Please, just let me go." But even as I said it, I saw the looks on the warriors' faces. They were looking at me with awe, with wonder, and, most terrifying of all, with certainty. Naiche spoke again in English. "The elders said she would come. They said she would be my wife, that through her, our people would find a new path." My legs nearly gave out. "Your wife?" He nodded once, his expression grave. "You have been sent by the spirits. You cannot leave." "But I'm not who you think I am." My voice rose, panicked now. "This is a mistake. My family is looking for me. I have to go home." Naiche said something in Apache, and 2 warriors moved forward. Before I could react, they had taken my arms, not roughly but firmly, holding me in place. "You will not be harmed," Naiche said. "You are precious to us. But you cannot leave. The prophecy must be fulfilled." "No!" I struggled against the warrior's grip, but they were too strong. "No, please, you don't understand. I'm not some prophesied bride. I'm just a woman who got lost in a storm. Please!" But Naiche had already turned away, giving orders in Apache. The warriors holding me began to guide me, not back toward the cleft, but deeper into the canyon, where I could now see more passages in the rock, leading to who knew where. I looked back desperately at the pool, at the narrow entrance, at the open sky above, at freedom, and then we passed through an opening in the rock, into a passage that grew darker with every step, and I realized with absolute certainty that my life had just changed forever. I had found the hidden Apache Canyon, and according to their prophecy, I was destined to become their chief's bride. God help me. The passage through the rock was narrow and dark, lit only by shafts of sunlight that filtered through cracks far above. The warriors guided me forward with steady hands, speaking softly to each other in Apache. I couldn't understand their words, but their tone had changed from the initial shock and argument. Now they sounded almost reverent. That frightened me more than anger would have. After what felt like an eternity of walking through increasingly narrow passages, we emerged into another canyon, larger than the first, with a small stream running through it and dozens of wickiups scattered across the canyon floor. These traditional Apache dwellings were dome-shaped structures made of wooden poles covered with brush and hides. Smoke rose from several of them, and I could smell cooking meat. We'd entered an entire hidden village. As we descended into the village, people began to emerge from the wickiups. Women with long black hair and children who stopped their play to stare. Old men who straightened from their work. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch our procession. And then someone shouted, and suddenly there were people running toward us. Not attacking, but rushing forward with expressions of amazement and excitement. They were pointing at me, talking rapidly in Apache, and I heard that word again, the prophecy. Naiche raised his hand and the crowd stopped, though they continued to murmur excitedly. He spoke in Apache, a long speech that I couldn't understand, but I heard my description mentioned, hair like autumn wheat, coming from the desert, the prophecy. When he finished, the entire village erupted in celebration. People were laughing, crying, embracing each other. An old woman pushed through the crowd and reached out to touch my hair, tears streaming down her weathered face. She said something in Apache that sounded like a prayer. I stood frozen, overwhelmed and terrified. This was not the savage attack Mr. Henderson had described. This was something else entirely. Something I had no framework for understanding. Naiche spoke to me again in his halting English. My people have waited long time for you. Very long time. This is happy day. He struggled with the words, clearly searching for the right way to explain. My grandmother, she saw you in vision, 3 winters before she died. She told elders. They have been waiting. But I'm not, I started, but he held up his hand. You will see. In time, you will understand. Now, you must meet my mother. He gestured to a woman who had been standing slightly apart from the crowd. She was perhaps in her mid-40s, with silver threads in her black hair and a face that might have been beautiful once but was now marked by hardship and sorrow. Her eyes, when they met mine, were intelligent and assessing, not filled with the awe I saw in others, but with careful scrutiny. She said something to Naiche in Apache, her tone questioning. Naiche replied, and I heard frustration in his voice. They went back and forth for several exchanges, and it was clear she was expressing doubts. Finally, she turned to me and spoke directly to me in Apache, as if expecting me to understand. When I could only shake my head helplessly, her mouth tightened. My mother, Dolly, Naiche said to me. She says you must prove you are the one from prophecy. Not just hair, must be more. I can't prove something that isn't true, I said, my voice shaking. Please, I just want to go home to my family. Naiche translated this for his mother, and her response was sharp and quick. He looked uncomfortable as he translated back. She says if you are not the one, then you are just white woman who found Sacred Canyon. White woman who should not have seen this place. White woman who... He paused, searching for words. Who must not leave to tell soldiers where we hide. The implication was clear. If I couldn't prove I was their prophesied bride, I was simply a threat that needed to be eliminated. My mouth went dry. What do I need to do to prove it? Naiche spoke with his mother again. This time, an elderly man joined the conversation, the oldest person I'd seen in the village, with white hair and a face like crumpled leather. He studied me intently while they talked, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. Finally, Naiche turned back to me. Dakota says prophecy had more details. The woman would know sacred spring without being told, would understand the spirit speaking through water, he struggled with the translation, would see what others cannot see. I don't understand what that means, I said desperately. You will stay here, Naiche said. Learn our ways. In 3 days when moon is full, Dakota will test you. If you pass test, you are bride from prophecy. If not, he didn't finish the sentence, but his mother's expression told me everything I needed to know. 3 days, I whispered. He nodded. Then he said something to 2 women who had been standing nearby. They approached me with gentle smiles, and one of them took my arm carefully, not restraining me, but guiding me. Naiche spoke to me one more time. Sahali and Kimi will care for you. They will teach you. Learn well, Sarah Mitchell. Your life depends on it. The 2 women led me away from the crowd, toward a wiki up at the edge of the village. I looked back once and saw Naiche watching me, his expression unreadable. His mother stood beside him, her arms crossed, and I could feel her skepticism like a physical weight. Sahali and Kimi brought me to a wiki-up that was clean and well-maintained. Inside, it was surprisingly spacious, with sleeping mats arranged around a central fire pit. They gestured for me to sit, and I sank down onto one of the mats, my legs finally giving out. For several minutes, no one spoke. The 2 women worked quietly, one starting a small fire and the other bringing out food and water. When they finally sat down across from me, Sahale, the older of the 2, perhaps in her early 30s, pointed to herself and said her name slowly. Sahale. Then she pointed to the younger woman, who looked to be about my age. Kimi. She pointed to me questioningly. Sarah, I said. My name is Sarah. They both smiled and repeated my name, though it came out more like Sarah with their accent. Kimi handed me a bowl of something that looked like a stew with meat and corn. My stomach growled loudly despite my fear, and both women laughed. The sound was so normal, so human, that for a moment I forgot where I was. I ate slowly while they watched. The food was good. Better than the plain fare we'd been eating on the wagon train. When I finished, Sahali took the bowl and brought me water in a beautiful pottery vessel. Then, through gestures and simple words, they began to try to communicate with me. Kimi pointed to objects around the wiki-up and said the Apache words: fire, water, blanket, sleeping mat. I repeated them dutifully, and they corrected my pronunciation with patient smiles. Sahali pointed to my dress and made a face, then pointed to her own clothing. A long deerskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork. She gestured to my torn and filthy calico, as if to say it wouldn't do. They brought out Apache clothing for me. A soft deerskin dress similar to theirs, moccasins to replace my worn boots, and even a belt decorated with silver conchos. Kimmy gestured for me to change, then turned her back politely to give me privacy. I hesitated. Changing into Apache clothing felt like accepting this situation, like agreeing to become someone I wasn't. But my dress was ruined, and I couldn't wear it for 3 days without washing. Slowly, I unbuttoned the calico and slipped it off, then pulled the deerskin dress over my head. It fit surprisingly well, and it was more comfortable than my own dress had been, softer, with more freedom of movement. When I had the moccasins on, Sahali turned back around and clapped her hands in delight. She said something to Kimmy, and both women nodded approvingly. Then Sahali gestured to my hair, which was still matted with dust and hanging in tangled waves past my shoulders. She brought out a comb made of bone and sat behind me, beginning to work through the tangles with surprising gentleness. It was such a normal thing, a woman helping another woman with her hair, that I felt tears suddenly burning in my eyes. I thought of my mother, who had brushed my hair every night when I was young. My mother, who must be frantic with worry right now. My father and brother searching for me, maybe thinking I was dead. I have a family, I said, even though I knew they couldn't understand me. My mama is named Elizabeth. My papa is John. My brother Thomas. He's only 16. They need me. They're probably terrified. I need to get back to them. Sahali made soothing sounds and continued combing, as if she understood the emotion, even if not the words. When my hair was combed smooth, Kimmy brought out a small jar of something fragrant and rubbed it between her palms, then worked it through my hair. It smelled like desert flowers, sweet and clean. Then she braided my hair in a single long plait down my back, weaving in small leather ties. When she was finished, both women stood back and nodded with satisfaction. Sahali took my hand and led me outside the wickiup, where a group of children had gathered. They giggled and whispered when they saw me, and one brave little girl, no more than 6 years old, reached out to touch my braid. Sahali shooed them away gently, but she was smiling. She said something that made Kimmy laugh, and I wished desperately that I could understand. Over the next hours, they gave me a tour of the village. There were perhaps 50 people living in this hidden canyon, far fewer than I'd expected. I saw men working on weapons and tools, women tanning hides and weaving baskets, children playing a game with sticks and stones. It looked like any frontier community, really, except for the language and the traditional dwellings. But I also saw evidence of conflict with the white world. Some of the men carried rifles, clearly taken from U.S. soldiers. There were cavalry boots being worn by one warrior. A woman had a cooking pot that was obviously stolen from a settler's wagon. These people were at war with my people, and I was their captive. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and red, Naiche approached us. He spoke to Sahale and Kimi, then turned to me. "Tomorrow you will go to Sacred Spring again," he said. "Dakota will teach you about prophecy, about spirits. You must pay attention, learn everything." "And if I can't learn what he wants me to learn?" I asked. "If I can't prove I'm this prophesied person?" His dark eyes met mine steadily. "Then you cannot leave this place, cannot tell soldiers where we hide. You understand? You mean you'll kill me." He was quiet for a long moment. "My mother wants this. Some warriors want this. But he struggled with the English words. "I do not think spirits make mistakes. If you are here, there is reason. I will wait to see what reason is." It wasn't exactly a reprieve, but it was something. "Why do you speak English?" I asked suddenly. "Where did you learn?" His expression darkened. "When I was boy, soldiers took me, put me in school, mission school, said I must forget Apache ways, learn white ways. They cut my hair, beat me when I spoke my language. 3 years I was there." His jaw tightened. "Then I escaped, came home. But I remember white words." The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, and I suddenly understood his mother's hostility. Their son had been kidnapped by people who looked like me, people who had tried to destroy everything he was. Why would she want him to marry someone like me? "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said quietly. He looked surprised by my response. For a moment, something shifted in his expression, something softer than the stern chief's mask he usually wore. Then he nodded once and walked away. That night, lying on the sleeping mat in the wickiup while Sahali and Kimmy slept nearby, I stared up at the smoke hole and watched the stars wheel slowly overhead. I could hear the normal sounds of the village settling for the night. Quiet conversations, a baby crying, someone singing softly. They were just people. That was what kept striking me. Not the savage raiders Mr. Henderson had described, but just people trying to live their lives, protect their families, preserve their ways. But that didn't change the fact that I was a prisoner here, that my family was out there somewhere, grieving for me, that in 3 days I would be tested on something impossible, proving I was a person I definitely was not. I thought about the prophecy, Hair like autumn wheat. Well, my hair was the right color, but that had to be a coincidence. Coming from the desert when the dust walks, I'd certainly done that, but again, pure chance. The storm could have separated me at any time, sent me in any direction, would know the sacred spring without being told, would understand the spirits speaking through water, would see what others cannot see. What did that even mean? How could I possibly prove those things? I reached up and touched the braid Kimmy had woven, so different from the simple bun I usually wore. I thought about the deerskin dress I was wearing, the Apache food in my stomach, the Apache words I'd learned today. In just one day, I'd already started changing. What would 3 days do? What would 3 weeks do? What would happen if I could never go home? Would I forget who Sarah Mitchell was? Would I become the person these people wanted me to be? Outside the wickiup, a coyote howled, long and mournful. Another answered from across the canyon. The sound made me think of loneliness, of creatures calling out in the dark hoping someone would respond. I closed my eyes and tried to picture my mother's face, my father's voice, my brother's laugh. I tried to hold on to them like anchors, like reminders of who I really was. But sleep, when it finally came, was full of dreams. Dreams of sacred springs and ancient prophecies. Dreams of a young chief with dark eyes who'd been torn from his home as a child. Dreams of 2 worlds colliding, and me caught helplessly between them. When I woke the next morning, Sahali was shaking my shoulder gently. The sun was just rising, painting the wickiup walls with golden light. She gestured for me to follow her, and my heart sank. It was time to go back to the sacred spring. Time to face whatever test would determine whether I lived or died. We walked through the village in the early morning quiet, past wickiups where people were just beginning to stir. The air was cool and fresh, with that particular clarity that desert mornings have. Birds were singing their dawn chorus, and somewhere I could hear water flowing. Dakota was waiting for us at the entrance to the passage that led back to the sacred canyon. The old man studied me with eyes that seemed to see right through me, then said something to Sahale. She squeezed my arm encouragingly and turned back toward the village. I was alone with him. Without a word, Dakota turned and entered the passage. I followed, my heart pounding. We walked in silence through the narrow corridor, back the way I'd been brought yesterday. When we emerged into the sacred canyon with its pool and painted walls, the morning sun was just reaching the water, making it sparkle like diamonds. Dakota sat down on a flat rock near the pool and gestured for me to sit opposite him. Then he began to speak. In Apache, of course, which I couldn't understand, but he spoke slowly and pointed to things as he talked. The water, the paintings on the walls, the sky above, the trees. He talked for a long time while I sat and listened to words I couldn't comprehend. Then he stood and gestured for me to approach the pool. I walked to the water's edge and looked down. The pool was perhaps 10 feet across, perfectly clear, with the spring bubbling up from the sandy bottom. I could see every pebble, every plant growing beneath the surface. Dakota came to stand beside me and said something in Apache. Then he made a drinking gesture. I knelt and cupped water in my hands, bringing it to my lips. It was the same sweet, cold water I'd drunk when I first found this place. Just water. Nothing more. But Dakota shook his head and spoke again, more insistently. He pointed to the water, then to his ears, then to his heart. Listen. Feel. I looked down at the pool again, really trying this time. What was I supposed to hear? What was I supposed to feel? The water bubbled and flowed. The morning sun sparkled on its surface. Birds called from the trees. The wind whispered through the canyon. Nothing extraordinary, nothing magical. Just nature, being nature. I looked up at Dakota helplessly and shook my head. I don't understand. I'm sorry. I don't know what you want me to do. He sighed deeply, disappointment clear on his weathered face. Then he gestured for me to stay put and walked away, disappearing into the trees at the far end of the canyon. I sat down on the rocks beside the pool, feeling defeated. This was impossible. How could I prove I understood something I didn't actually understand? How could I pass a test when I didn't even know what the test was? I thought about running. The narrow passage was right there. If I could just get through it before Dakota came back, I could run. But where would I run to? The desert was vast, and I had no water, no food, no idea which direction to go. I'd probably die within a day. And even if I did manage to find my way back to civilization, what would happen to this village? Would I lead soldiers back here, even unintentionally? Would these people, Sahale and Kimmy, who'd been kind to me, the children who'd giggled at my braid, even stern Naiche, who'd at least treated me with respect, would they all be killed or captured? Could I live with that? I looked down at the water again, frustrated tears burning in my eyes. I don't know what you want from me, I whispered. I'm just Sarah Mitchell. I'm nobody special. I'm not magic. I'm not prophesied. I'm just a woman who got lost. The water bubbled and sparkled, offering no answers. I sat there for what felt like hours, alone with my thoughts and my fears. The sun climbed higher. The canyon grew warmer. I took off my moccasins and dangled my feet in the pool, feeling the cold water on my skin. And slowly, as I sat there in the quiet, something began to shift. I started noticing things. The way the sunlight filtered through the trees created patterns on the canyon walls that looked almost like the paintings. The way the water sound changed depending on where you sat, musical in one spot, rushing in another. The way birds landed in specific trees but avoided others. The way the wind seemed to circle the canyon rather than blow straight through. This place had a rhythm to it, a pattern, a kind of harmony that I'd been too frightened to notice before. I thought about the paintings on the walls, spirals and handprints and symbols. They weren't random. They meant something. They were a language, a way of speaking without words, a way of connecting with something larger than yourself. I thought about Dakota's gestures. Listen, feel. Maybe he wasn't asking me to hear literal voices in the water. Maybe he was asking me to pay attention, to notice, to see beyond the surface of things. I looked at my reflection in the pool, a young woman in Apache clothing, her honeyweed hair braided, her face sunburned and dirt-streaked. I looked different. But was I different? Who was Sarah Mitchell, really? A farmer's daughter from Missouri who wanted adventure. A woman who'd been willing to leave everything familiar and travel across half a continent to see California. A woman who'd survived a dust storm alone in the desert. A woman who, given the chance to escape this morning, had chosen to stay and face the unknown. Maybe I was stronger than I'd thought. Maybe the prophecy wasn't about magic or spirits at all. Maybe it was about someone with the courage to stand between two worlds. Someone willing to see beyond fear and hatred to the humanity underneath. Someone who could help two peoples understand each other. Maybe that someone could be me. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear Dakota return until he was standing right beside me. I looked up, startled, and saw that Naiche was with him. Both men were watching me intently. Naiche spoke first, in English. Dakota says you have been here long time. Very quiet, very still. He asks, "Did you hear the spirits speak?" I took a breath and chose my words carefully. I don't know if I heard spirits, but I heard something. I noticed things I hadn't noticed before. The way this place has patterns, the way everything connects, the water, the trees, the paintings, the light, it all fits together. It makes sense. I paused. Is that what he meant? About understanding what the water says? Naiche translated, and I watched Dakota's face. The old man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He spoke to Naiche for several minutes, and I caught a few words I'd learned yesterday. Water, heart, sea. Finally, Naiche turned back to me. He says you begin to understand. Not fully, not yet, but you begin. He says, Naiche hesitated, as if unsure how to translate. He says sometimes white people see world as separate things. This tree, that rock, that animal. But Apache see world as all connected. Everything speaks to everything. Water speaks to trees speak to animals speak to sky. All one voice, all one family. I think I understand that, I said slowly. Or I'm starting to. Dakota spoke again, and this time his tone was almost approving. He says you have 2 more days to learn, Naiche translated, then test. But he thinks maybe prophecy was right. Maybe you are the one. Something in my chest loosened, relief mixed with something else I couldn't quite name. Come, Naiche said. We return to village. Tomorrow you learn more. As we walked back through the passage, I found myself thinking about what Dakota had said. Everything connected. All one family. 2 worlds that saw themselves as separate, as enemies. But maybe they weren't as different as everyone thought. Maybe there was a way to bridge the gap between them. And maybe, just maybe, I was meant to be that bridge. Whether the prophecy was real or not. Whether I truly was chosen by spirits or just happened to stumble into this place by chance. Maybe that didn't matter. What mattered was what I chose to do next. I looked at Naiche walking ahead of me, his shoulders broad in the narrow passage, his long black hair swinging with each step. A man who'd been kidnapped as a child and forced to forget who he was. A man who'd escaped and come home, only to find his people hunted and hiding. A man who'd been told he had to marry a stranger to save his people. We were both trapped by this prophecy, both forced into roles we hadn't chosen. But maybe, if we worked together, we could turn it into something real, something good. When we emerged into the village, the sun was high overhead. People stopped their work to watch us pass, and I saw hope in their faces. Hope that I was beginning to understand I might not be able to fulfill, but I would try. For Sahale and Kimmy's kindness, for those giggling children, for Dakota's patience, for Naiche's unexpected mercy. And for myself, because maybe, just maybe, this was the adventure I'd been seeking all along. An adventure that might save lives instead of ending them. An adventure that might heal instead of harm. If only I could pass the test. The second day began with Kimmy shaking me awake before dawn. She whispered something in Apache and gestured for me to dress quickly and quietly. Sahali was already awake, gathering supplies into a woven basket. When we stepped outside the wickiup, the village was still dark except for the pale gray light in the eastern sky. A few cooking fires glowed like small stars, but most people were still asleep. Dakota was waiting near the passage entrance, along with 3 women I hadn't met before. They were all older, grandmothers, I guessed, with weathered faces and knowing eyes. When they saw me, they began speaking rapidly to each other in Apache, studying me the way my mother used to study fabric before buying it at the general store. One of them reached out and took my face in her hands, turning my head from side to side. She said something that made the others nod, then released me and spoke to Dakota. Sahali touched my arm and gestured for me to follow. The whole group of us, Dakota, the 3 grandmothers, Sahali, Kimi, and me, entered the passage and made our way back to the sacred canyon. When we emerged into the morning light, I saw that someone had been here before us. A small fire was burning near the pool, with stones arranged in a circle around it. Various plants and herbs were laid out on a flat rock. Some I recognized like sage, and many I didn't. The 3 grandmothers immediately went to work. One began sorting through the plants. Another stirred something in a small clay pot over the fire, and the third started singing, a low, rhythmic chant that seemed to resonate off the canyon walls. Dakota gestured for me to sit by the fire, and I obeyed. Sahali and Kimi sat on either side of me, and I was grateful for their presence. Whatever was about to happen, at least I wasn't alone. The grandmother who'd been stirring the pot brought it over to me. The contents looked like a thick tea, dark and aromatic. She said something in Apache and held it out to me. I hesitated, looking at Sahale. She nodded encouragingly and mimed drinking. I took the pot and brought it to my lips. The liquid was bitter and earthy, with a taste I couldn't quite place. I drank it all, trying not to grimace, while the grandmothers watched approvingly. Then they began to work on me. One of them unwound my braid and spread my hair loose around my shoulders. Another brought out a mixture of what looked like clay and plant materials and began painting symbols on my face and arms, the same spirals and lines I'd seen on the canyon walls. The third continued singing, her voice rising and falling in a pattern that felt ancient. I sat very still, understanding that this was important even if I didn't understand what it meant. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the canyon. The fire crackled, the spring bubbled, and the grandmother's song wound through it all like a thread connecting everything together. After what felt like hours, they finally stepped back. The singing stopped. Dakota stood and came to face me, speaking in Apache for several minutes. His tone was serious, almost formal, like he was reciting something important. Then he gestured to the pool. I stood, my legs stiff from sitting so long, and walked to the water's edge. My reflection looked back at me, my face painted with sacred symbols, my hair loose and wild, my eyes wide with uncertainty. Dakota said something else, and Sahali came to stand beside me. She took my hand and spoke to me softly in Apache, her tone gentle and encouraging. Then she pointed to the water and made a gesture I didn't understand, pressing her hand to her heart, then opening it toward the pool. Listen with your heart, not your ears. That's what she was trying to tell me, I was sure of it. I knelt by the pool and placed my hands in the water. It was cold, so cold it made my fingers ache. I closed my eyes and tried to do what Dakota had asked, to listen, to feel, to understand. At first, there was nothing, just the sensation of cold water, the distant sound of the grandmother's murmuring, the crackle of the fire. But then, slowly, I became aware of something else. Not a voice exactly, not words, but a sense of presence. Like the feeling you get when someone is watching you, even when you can't see them. Like the way you know a storm is coming before the first clouds appear. The water was alive. Not in the way an animal or person is alive, but alive nonetheless. It had been here long before me, would be here long after I was gone. It had sustained countless people, countless animals, countless plants. It connected the deep earth to the open sky. It was the heartbeat of this sacred place. And in that moment, I understood what the prophecy meant about understanding the spirit speaking through water. It wasn't about magic. It was about recognizing that everything in this world had value, had purpose, had a kind of consciousness. The water didn't speak in words. It spoke in the way it sustained life, in the way it shaped the land, in the way it connected all living things. I opened my eyes and looked at Dakota. I understand, I said quietly. It's not about hearing voices. It's about recognizing that everything is alive in its own way. that we're not separate from the world around us. We're part of it. The water doesn't speak to us. We speak to each other because we're made of the same things. We're all part of the same story. I didn't know if he could understand my English, but Sahali must have grasped something in my tone or expression because she smiled and squeezed my hand. Dakota watched me for a long moment, his ancient eyes searching my face. Then he nodded slowly and said something to the grandmothers. One of them let out a cry of joy, and suddenly all three were embracing each other, tears streaming down their faces. Had I passed? I looked at Sahali questioningly, and she was crying too, nodding and laughing. She said something that sounded like congratulations, then hugged me tightly. I felt tears in my own eyes, though I wasn't entirely sure what had just happened. Relief, yes, but also something deeper, a sense that I'd crossed some invisible threshold, that I'd touched something true and real and important. Dakota spoke again, and this time his tone was different, warm, almost affectionate. He reached out and touched my painted forehead, saying what sounded like a blessing. The rest of the morning was spent in the canyon. The grandmothers taught me, or tried to teach me, about the different plants they'd brought. Through gestures and demonstrations, I learned which ones were for medicine, which for food, which for ceremonies. I learned how to identify them by their leaves, their smell, their flowers. Sahali showed me how to weave grass into a small basket, her hands moving so quickly I could barely follow. When I tried, my fingers were clumsy and the grass kept slipping, but she just laughed and helped me patiently. Kimmy taught me words. She'd point to something and say the Apache name, making me repeat it until I got the pronunciation right. Water, fire, tree, sky, heart, home. That last word made me pause. Home. What was home now? Missouri felt like a lifetime ago. The wagon train seemed like a dream. Even my family's faces were starting to blur in my memory, and that terrified me. I tried to hold on to them. Mama's gentle voice, Papa's strong hands, Thomas's boyish laughter. But they were fading, like photographs left too long in the sun. Around midday, Naiche appeared in the canyon. He'd brought food, dried meat, nuts, and something like bread made from ground seeds. We all sat together and ate, the grandmothers chattering happily while Dakota sat in dignified silence. Naiche sat beside me, and after a while, he spoke quietly in English. Dakota says you have gift. You see what is real, not just what eyes show. He says prophecy was right. I don't know about that, I said honestly. I just tried to pay attention, to really look and listen. Most people do not, he said. White people especially. They look at land and see only what they can use. Look at animals and see only food or danger. Look at Apache and see only enemy. His dark eyes met mine. You are different. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm just trying to survive. He smiled slightly. The first time I'd seen him smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less severe. Survival is good reason to learn. Can I ask you something? I said, emboldened by the smile. He nodded. Why did you really go along with this? With the prophecy? You were educated at a white school. You must have learned to question these kinds of beliefs. Why accept that I'm some kind of chosen bride? His smile faded. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, my people are dying, not just from bullets and sickness, from forgetting who we are. Young people want to be like whites. Old people die and their knowledge dies with them. We are becoming ghosts of ourselves. He picked up a handful of sand and let it trickle through his fingers. My grandmother saw you in vision before I was born. She told my mother told me. She said a bridge would come, someone who could walk between two worlds and keep both alive, not make us white, not make whites Apache, but find way for both to exist. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person, I said quietly. Yes, he agreed. But if there is even small chance prophecy is true, I must try. For my people, for my grandmother's memory, for children who will come after us. He looked at me intently. You understand? I did. It was the same reason I was trying so hard to pass Dakota's tests. Not because I believed in prophecies, but because failing meant people would die. Maybe I couldn't save everyone, but maybe I could save this village, these people who'd shown me unexpected kindness. What happens tomorrow? I asked. Dakota said 3 days. Tomorrow is the 3rd day. Tomorrow is test, Naiche said. Real test. Today and yesterday were preparation. Tomorrow, before all the people, you must show you are the one. You must demonstrate understanding. Must prove you can be bridge between worlds. My stomach dropped. How am I supposed to do that? I do not know, he said honestly. Dakota has not told me. He says test will reveal itself. That was not comforting. We spent the rest of the afternoon in the canyon, and as the sun began to sink toward the western rim, we made our way back to the village. I was exhausted, physically from the long day, and emotionally from the intensity of everything I'd experienced. But when we emerged from the passage, I found the village transformed. Someone had built a large fire in the center of the open area, and people were gathered around it. There was food cooking, more than I'd seen before, and someone was playing a drum. The atmosphere felt celebratory, almost festive. Doli, Naiche's mother, stood near the fire. When she saw us, she said something to Naiche, her tone sharp with questions. He replied, and I heard Takota's name. The old man himself emerged from the passage behind us and added something, gesturing to me. Doli's expression didn't soften, but she nodded curtly. Then she turned and announced something to the gathered crowd. A cheer went up, and suddenly people were approaching me, touching my painted face, examining my Apache clothing, speaking rapidly in their language. Sahali rescued me, taking my arm and guiding me through the crowd to a place of honor near the fire. Kimi brought me food and water. The drumming grew louder, and people began to dance. A rhythmic, swaying dance that seemed to tell a story. I watched, mesmerized. This was nothing like the dances back home. No formal steps or partner work. This was something rawer, more primal. The dancers moved with the drum, with the fire, with something I couldn't quite name but could feel in my bones. After a while, Kimi tugged on my hand, trying to get me to join. I shook my head, embarrassed, but she insisted. Sahali joined in, and soon they were pulling me to my feet and into the circle of dancers. I felt ridiculous at first, not knowing the steps, moving clumsily while everyone else flowed like water. But Sahali and Kimi stayed close, showing me simple movements, encouraging me with smiles. And gradually, I stopped thinking and just moved, felt the drum, felt the fire's warmth, felt the community around me, and for a moment, just a brief, shining moment, I felt like I belonged. The celebration went on late into the night. I met more people, learned more names I'd probably forget by morning. An old man showed me how to make a particular rhythm on a smaller drum. A young mother let me hold her baby, who grabbed my painted finger and wouldn't let go. A group of children performed a dance they'd clearly been practicing, and everyone applauded enthusiastically. Throughout it all, I was aware of Naiche watching me, not in a possessive way, more like he was studying me, trying to figure out who I really was. Once, our eyes met across the fire and something passed between us. Understanding, maybe, or recognition that we were both trapped in something bigger than ourselves. It was past midnight when the celebration finally wound down. Sahali and Kimi walked me back to our wiki-up, both of them yawning. Inside, I collapsed onto my sleeping mat, every muscle aching, but I couldn't sleep. My mind was too full of everything that had happened. The ceremony at the sacred spring, the lessons from the grandmothers, the celebration, the realization that these people had accepted me, at least provisionally, as one of them. And tomorrow, I would have to prove I deserved that acceptance. I thought about my family again. Had they given up searching for me? Had they held a funeral thinking me dead? Or were they still out there? My father refusing to believe I was gone, pushing the wagon train to keep looking. Part of me hoped they'd moved on, hoped they'd reached California and started their new life. It hurt to think that. But the alternative, imagining them still searching, still suffering, hurt more. I touched the painted symbols on my face, feeling the dried clay crack slightly under my fingers. Tomorrow these would be washed away. Tomorrow I'd have to stand before the tribe and prove something I still wasn't sure I could prove. But tonight, for just a few more hours, I could lie here and imagine that I was exactly where I was meant to be. That maybe the prophecy was real after all. That maybe Sarah Mitchell from Missouri and the woman these people needed me to be could somehow be the same person. The next morning came too quickly. I woke to find Sahale already up, working on something by the fire. When she saw I was awake, she brought over a bowl of water and a cloth, gesturing for me to wash the paint from my face. I did so slowly, watching the sacred symbols dissolve and run off my skin in muddy streams. When I was clean, she brought out a different dress, more elaborate than the one I'd been wearing, with intricate beadwork in patterns of blue and white. She helped me put it on, then worked on my hair, braiding it in a more complex style than before. Kimi arrived with a necklace made of small bones and turquoise stones. She fastened it around my neck carefully, adjusting it until it sat just right. They were dressing me like a bride, I realized with a jolt. This wasn't just about proving the prophecy. If I passed today's test, I would actually become Naiche's wife. The full weight of that hit me for the first time. Marriage. To a man I barely knew, in a culture I'd only just begun to understand. Forever. My hands started to shake. Sahali noticed and took my hands in hers, squeezing gently. She said something in Apache. I didn't understand the words, but her tone was reassuring. You can do this. You're strong enough. Was I, though? There was a commotion outside, and Kimmy peeked out through the wiki-up opening. She said something excitedly to Sahali, then gestured for me to come. I stepped outside and saw the entire village gathering in the open area. The fire from last night had been built up again, burning bright even in the morning sun. Dakota stood on one side of it, dressed in ceremonial clothing I hadn't seen before. The 3 grandmothers from yesterday were there too, and several other elders I recognized. And across the fire from them stood Naiche. He was also dressed ceremonially, his best clothing, his hair decorated with eagle feathers, a magnificent necklace of bear claws around his neck. He looked every inch a chief, proud and powerful. When he saw me emerge from the wiki-up, his eyes widened slightly. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the distance. Then Dolly appeared and said something sharp, breaking the moment. People began to take their places around the fire, creating a large circle. Sahale and Kimi guided me to stand opposite Naiche, with the fire between us. Dakota raised his hands, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. He began to speak, a long speech in Apache that I couldn't understand, but I could hear the gravity in his voice. This was it, the final test. He spoke for several minutes, occasionally gesturing to me, to Naiche, to the sacred canyon beyond the village, to the sky above. The crowd listened raptly. When he finished, he turned to me and spoke a single word, "Come." I walked around the fire to stand before him. He studied my face for a long moment, then said something in Apache. One of the grandmothers translated into halting English. "You have learned to see with more than eyes, to hear with more than ears. Now you must show this to all people, must prove you are bridge between 2 worlds." She gestured to a flat stone near the fire, where several objects had been laid out. A bowl of water from the sacred spring, a handful of seeds, a piece of white cloth, a cavalry button, clearly taken from a soldier's uniform, and a small leather pouch. "You must make ceremony," the grandmother said. "Show how 2 peoples can be one. Show us path forward." I stared at the objects, my mind racing. This was the test? Creating a ceremony? I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never even seen an Apache ceremony until yesterday. But then I remembered what Dakota had taught me. Everything is connected. Everything speaks to everything. All one family. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. I picked up the bowl of water first, holding it carefully. Water connects all living things. Every person, every animal, every plant needs it to survive. It doesn't belong to Apache or to white people. It belongs to everyone. I walked around the circle, offering the bowl to people. First to Dakota, who drank, then to Naiche, then to Dolly, who hesitated before accepting, then to others, until the bowl had been passed around the entire circle. When it came back to me, nearly empty, I poured the last few drops on the ground, letting them soak into the earth. "Water connects us to each other and to the land," I said, hoping someone would translate. "It's not mine or yours. It's ours, all of us together." Next, I took the seeds. These represented growth, future, possibility. I held them up so everyone could see. "These seeds could grow into food that feeds Apache children," I said. "Or they could feed white children. Seeds don't know the difference. They just grow, if someone plants them and cares for them." I paused, searching for the right words. Maybe peace between peoples is like seeds. Someone has to plant it. Someone has to care for it. But if we do, it will grow. I walked to Naiche and placed half the seeds in his hand. Then I kept half for myself. "We plant them together," I said. "We care for them together. We share what grows." I saw people nodding, saw the grandmother translating rapidly for those who didn't understand English, saw Naiche looking at the seeds in his hand with an expression I couldn't quite read. I picked up the white cloth next. This one was harder. White cloth, representing my people, their civilization, their encroachment on Apache lands. How could I make this into something about unity instead of conflict? I held it for a long moment, thinking. Then I had an idea. I tore the cloth into strips. Then I went to Sahale and gestured to ask if I could have a piece of her dress fringe. She looked confused but nodded. I carefully cut a small piece of leather fringe from her dress. Then I did the same with my own dress, taking a piece of the beadwork. I held up all 3 pieces: white cloth, Apache leather, and beadwork made by Apache hands. Then I began to braid them together, weaving the different materials into one cord. "Different materials," I said as I worked. "Different colors, different textures. But when we braid them together, they make something stronger than any one piece alone." I held up the finished braid. "This is what a bridge between worlds looks like. Not everyone becoming the same, but everyone's strength woven together." There was silence for a moment. Then someone began to ululate. A high, trilling cry that I'd learned was Apache women's way of showing approval. Others joined in, and soon the sound filled the canyon. I felt tears threatening but pushed them back. 2 more objects to go. The cavalry button was the hardest. It represented violence, conflict, the soldiers who hunted these people. How could I possibly make this into something positive? I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm. Then I walked to the edge of the fire and held it over the flames. This represents war, I said. Pain, death, taking from each other instead of sharing. The prophecy didn't bring me here to continue war. It brought me here to end it. I dropped the button into the fire. Let this burn. Let the metal melt and change into something new, something that doesn't hurt anyone. The crowd was completely silent now, watching intently. I can't make peace between all Apache and all white people, I said honestly. I'm just one person, but I can promise that in this place, in this village, I will work for peace. I will try to be the bridge my grandmother's vision showed. I will learn your ways and teach you mine, not so one destroys the other, but so we can understand each other. I turned to face Naiche directly. If you'll have me. The last object was the leather pouch. I picked it up and untied the cord, looking inside. It contained earth, red desert dirt, the kind that covered this entire territory. I understood immediately. I went to Naiche and held out the pouch. This earth is home to Apache people. It's sacred. It holds the bones of your ancestors, the memories of your people. I can never truly be Apache. I wasn't born to this land or this culture. But if you accept me, I will honor it. I will learn to see it the way you see it. I will help protect it. I poured some of the earth into my palm, then reached out and took Naiche's hand, pouring earth into his palm too. We both stand on the same ground, I said quietly. We both need this earth to survive. Maybe that's where we start, with what we share, not what divides us. Naiche closed his hand around the earth, his dark eyes locked on. Something passed between us in that moment, something deeper than words. Not love, not yet, but possibility, understanding, a willingness to try. Dakota stood and spoke, his voice carrying across the crowd. I didn't need a translation to know what he was saying. I could see it in people's faces, in their tears, in their smiles. I had passed the test. The grandmother who'd been translating came to me, tears streaming down her weathered face. You are truly the one, she said in her broken English. You see with heart. You understand. You are bridge. You are hope. She took my hand and Naiche's hand and placed them together. Now you marry. Now 2 peoples become one family. My heart pounded as I looked at Naiche. His expression was serious, but not unkind. He said something in Apache. A question, I thought. The grandmother translated. He asks if you accept this freely. If you choose to be his wife, or if you only do it to save your life. It was a fair question, and in that moment, standing there in my Apache dress with earth from the sacred land in my palm, surrounded by people who'd begun to feel like family, I realized the answer was complicated. Was I doing this to survive? Yes, partly. But was that the only reason? No, not anymore. I'd come to care about these people, about their struggle, their culture, their future. I'd come to see Naiche not as a savage or a captor, but as a man trying to protect his people in an impossible situation, a man who'd shown me mercy when he could have killed me, a man who'd given me a chance to prove myself instead of simply accepting or rejecting me. Could I build a real marriage with him? I didn't know, but I was willing to try. I choose this, I said, looking directly into Naiche's eyes. Not just to survive, but because I believe in what we're trying to do here. I believe peace is possible. I believe the bridge can be real, and I want to help build it. The grandmother translated, and I saw relief flash across Naiche's face. He said something back, and she translated. He says he will honor you, protect you, learn from you as you learn from him. He says you are brave, and he is grateful the spirit sent you. Then Dakota began to sing, a deep, resonant chant that seemed to come from the earth itself. The grandmothers joined in, and soon the whole village was singing, their voices rising toward the sky. Naiche took both my hands in his. His palms were warm and calloused from work, from weapons, from survival, but his grip was gentle. And in that moment, with the song washing over us and the fire burning bright and the sacred earth binding us together, Sarah Mitchell from Missouri became someone new. I became Naiche's wife. I became part of the Apache people. I became the bridge between 2 worlds. Whether I could fulfill that role, whether I was truly strong enough, wise enough, brave enough, only time would tell. But I would try. For all of us, I would try. The wedding celebration lasted until dawn. I danced until my feet ached, ate until I couldn't eat anymore, and learned more Apache words in one night than I'd learned in the previous 3 days combined. By the time the first light touched the canyon rim, I was exhausted, but strangely exhilarated. Naiche and I had barely spoken during the celebration. There'd been too many people, too much ceremony, too much noise. But as the crowd finally began to disperse and people drifted back to their wiki-ups, he approached me where I sat by the dying fire. "Come," he said simply, offering his hand. I took it and let him help me to my feet. He led me across the village to a wiki-up I hadn't been in before, larger than most, with beautiful designs painted on the hide covering. His home, our home now. Inside, it was neat and sparse. A central fire pit, sleeping mats, weapons hung on the walls, a few personal items I couldn't identify in the dim light. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, suddenly nervous. We were married now. I knew what that meant. But Naiche simply sat across from me, the fire pit between us, and studied me with those dark, intelligent eyes. "You are tired," he said finally. "Yes," I admitted. "Sleep then." He gestured to the sleeping mat. "I will keep watch." I blinked in surprise. "You don't... we're married now. Don't you expect..." He shook his head. "You are my wife because spirits chose you. Because prophecy said you would come. Not because you chose me. I will not..." He struggled for the English words. "I will not force you. You need time. To know me. To choose freely." The relief that washed over me was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, then stood and went to the entrance of the wiki-up, settling down there with his back to me, his rifle across his lap, standing guard, protecting me even from himself. I lay down on the sleeping mat, pulled a blanket over myself, and was asleep within minutes. When I woke, the sun was high overhead. I'd slept half the day away. Naiche was gone, but Sahali and Kimmy were there, setting out food and water. When they saw I was awake, they both grinned and began chattering excitedly in Apache. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "I don't understand what you're saying, but I'm guessing it's something about last night." Kimmy came over and hugged me, then said something that included the word happy and Naiche's name. The next few days settled into a routine. Mornings were spent with the women, learning to prepare food the Apache way, to tan hides, to weave baskets and make clothing. Afternoons I spent with Dakota and the grandmothers, learning about plants and medicines and the stories behind the sacred places. Evenings were spent with Naiche, slowly learning to communicate despite the language barrier. He was patient with me, teaching me Apache words and phrases while I helped him practice his English. We talked about simple things at first, the weather, the day's events, stories from our childhoods. Gradually, as we grew more comfortable with each other, the conversations deepened. I learned that he'd become chief 2 years ago when his father was killed in a raid by Mexican bandits, that he'd been only 23, younger than most chiefs, and many had doubted he could lead, that he'd spent those 2 years proving himself, trying to keep his people safe in an increasingly dangerous world. I told him about Missouri, about my family, about the dream of California that had brought us west, about my father's farm, my mother's garden, my brother's plans to study law someday, about the life I'd left behind. "Do you miss them?" he asked one evening as we sat outside the wiki-up, watching the stars appear. "Every day," I admitted. "Every single day. I wonder if they think I'm dead, if they're still searching, if they made it to California." "You could go back," he said quietly. "Find them. I would not stop you." I looked at him in surprise. "But the prophecy says you are bridge. Does not say you must stay forever if you do not wish to." His expression was serious. "I will not keep you prisoner, Sarah. If you want to leave, I will help you." The offer was genuine. I could see that in his eyes, and it moved me more than I could express. "I'm not ready to leave," I said softly. "Not yet. There's still so much I need to learn, so much I need to understand." He nodded, seeming satisfied, and we sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around us. But our peaceful routine was shattered on the 8th day after our marriage. I was working with Kimmy, grinding corn into meal, when a scout came running into the village. He was one of the young warriors who kept watch at the canyon entrance, and his face was tight with worry. He ran straight to Naiche and spoke rapidly in Apache. The effect was immediate. Naiche's whole body went rigid, and he began shouting orders. Warriors grabbed weapons and ran for the canyon entrance. Women began gathering children and ushering them toward the back passages. The peaceful village transformed into organized chaos within seconds. Sahale grabbed my arm and pulled me toward our wiki-up. "Come! Must hide! What's happening?" I asked, stumbling after her. "Soldiers," she said, one of the English words she'd learned from me. "White soldiers coming." My heart stopped. Soldiers, my people, coming to this hidden place. Had they found me? Were they searching for me? Or was this just bad timing, a patrol that happened to get too close. Sahali pushed me into the wickiup and began frantically gathering essential items: water, bags, dried food, weapons. Other women were doing the same, preparing for the possibility of flight or siege. But I couldn't move. Soldiers meant potential rescue, meant I could go home, see my family again, return to my old life. This nightmare could be over. Except it wasn't a nightmare anymore, was it? These people were my people now. This village was my home, and those soldiers coming, they wouldn't see a community trying to survive. They'd see Apache raiders, hostiles, savages to be eliminated, and they'd see me as a captive who needed rescuing, whether I wanted to be rescued or not. I ran out of the wickiup, ignoring Sahali's cry of protest. I had to find Naiche. Had to do something. I didn't know what, but I couldn't just hide while two worlds I belonged to prepared to destroy each other. I found him near the passage entrance, speaking intently with his warriors. When he saw me approaching, his expression darkened. "Go back. Not safe." "How many soldiers?" I demanded. "Scout says maybe 20, maybe more. They are at entrance to Sacred Canyon. They found it. 20 soldiers against 50 people, half of them women and children. The Apache warriors were skilled fighters, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. If this turned into a battle, people on both sides would die, unless I could stop it. Let me go to them," I said quickly. "Let me talk to them. I can explain." "Explain what?" Naiche's voice was harsh. "That you are here by choice? They will not believe. They will think we captured you. They will attack anyway. Maybe, but maybe not. At least let me try." "No." He gripped my shoulders, his eyes fierce. "If you go to them, I lose you. You are bridge. You are hope for my people. I cannot risk—" "Naiche, please." I grabbed his arms, holding his gaze. "If there's any chance I can prevent bloodshed, I have to take it. That's what a bridge does. It connects. It mediates. It prevents the two sides from destroying each other." He stared at me for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Then slowly he released me. "If you go, you may not come back. Soldiers may take you away. Your family may be with them." "I know," I whispered. "You would choose that? Choose them over us?" It was the same question I'd been asking myself since the scout arrived, and the answer was both simple and impossibly complicated. "I choose to try to save both," I said. "That's what you married me to do, isn't it? To be the bridge?" He closed his eyes briefly, pain flashing across his face. Then he nodded and called out an order in Apache. One of the warriors came forward, the same young man who'd first seen me at the sacred spring. Naiche spoke to him at length in Apache, clearly giving detailed instructions. The warrior nodded repeatedly, his expression grave. Then Naiche turned back to me. "Chado will go with you. He will translate if needed. But Sarah," his voice caught slightly, "if they take you, if you cannot come back, I will understand. You have already given us more than we deserved." On impulse, I reached up and touched his face. "I'm coming back," I said firmly. "I promise." I wasn't sure I could keep that promise, but I had to say it anyway. Chado and I made our way through the passages toward the Sacred Canyon. As we walked, I tried to prepare myself for what I might see. Would my father be with the patrol? My brother? Men I'd known from the wagon train? Would they even recognize me? I was wearing Apache clothing. My hair was braided in Apache style. My skin was tanned dark from days in the desert sun. I looked like one of them now. We emerged cautiously into the Sacred Canyon, and I saw them immediately. Not 20 soldiers, more like 15, but 15 well-armed cavalry soldiers was more than enough. They were spread out along the canyon walls, rifles raised, clearly searching for something. Searching for me, I realized with a shock, because pinned to a tree near the spring was a piece of paper, a wanted poster with a sketch of my face. Missing. Sarah Mitchell, age 23. Last seen near. They thought I was kidnapped. They were mounting a rescue. I stepped out from the passage, my hands raised, and called out, "Don't shoot! I'm Sarah Mitchell, I'm here!" The soldiers spun toward me, rifles instantly pointed in my direction. One of them, an officer with sergeant stripes, lowered his rifle and stared. "Miss Mitchell?" "Yes," I said, walking slowly toward them. Chado stayed in the passage, out of sight. "Yes, it's me." The sergeant approached cautiously, his eyes scanning me up and down, taking in my Apache clothing, my braided hair, the necklace around my neck. "My God," he breathed. "We found you. Are you hurt? Have they? "I'm fine," I said quickly. "I'm not hurt. I'm being treated well." "Where are they?" He raised his rifle again, looking around the canyon. "Where are the savages who took you?" "They didn't take me," I said firmly. "I was lost in a dust storm. I found this place by accident. They've been caring for me." The sergeant's expression was skeptical, Miss Mitchell, it's all right. You're safe now. You don't have to protect them. Just tell us where their camp is and we'll get you out of here. I don't want to get out of here, I said, and watched his face change from concern to confusion to anger. You don't, Miss Mitchell? Have they done something to your mind? Sometimes captives develop a kind of attachment to their captors. It's not real. It's just survival. My mind is fine, Sergeant, and I'm not a captive. How could I possibly explain this? I'm married to their chief. I'm staying with them by choice. The sergeant's face went white. Married? To a savage? Miss Mitchell, that's not a legal marriage. That's a forced... It's not forced, I interrupted. I chose it. I'm helping to build peace between our peoples and theirs. I'm trying to prevent more bloodshed. Sergeant, please, you need to leave this place. Don't tell anyone where it is. These people just want to live in peace. Peace? The sergeant's voice rose. These are Apache raiders. They've killed settlers, attacked supply wagons, stolen horses. We have orders to eliminate any hostile camps we find. They've done those things because they're desperate, I said. Because we've taken their lands, hunted them like animals, tried to destroy their way of life. If we can just... Miss Mitchell. The sergeant's voice was flat now. I have my orders. You're coming with us, whether you want to or not. As for the Apache camp, you're going to tell us where it is. No, I said firmly. I won't. He gestured to two of his soldiers. Take her. If she resists, restrain her. The soldiers moved toward me, and I backed up toward the passage. Wait, please, just listen to me for 1 minute. We've listened enough, the sergeant said. You're clearly not in your right mind. We'll get you back to civilization, get you cleaned up, and once you've had time to recover from this ordeal... An arrow thudded into the ground between the sergeant and his men. Everyone froze. Chato stepped out of the passage, his bow raised with another arrow already nocked. He spoke in Apache, his voice clear and strong, carrying across the canyon. I didn't need translation to understand the message. Come any closer and we'll kill you. The sergeant's rifle came up instantly, along with every other soldier's weapon. Stand down! He shouted. Stand down or we'll fire! No! I screamed, throwing myself between the soldiers and Chato. Don't shoot! Please don't shoot! Miss Mitchell, get out of the way! I won't! I stood my ground, my arms spread wide. If you want to shoot him, you'll have to shoot me first. The sergeant's face was purple with rage. You're defending these savages? Your own people came looking for you and you're choosing them over us? I'm not choosing sides, I said desperately. That's the whole point. I'm trying to bridge the gap between us. Sergeant, I know this seems crazy, but please just trust me. These people aren't your enemies. They're just trying to survive. And if you attack their village, you'll be killing women and children along with the warriors. Is that what you want? For a long moment, no one moved. The soldiers kept their rifles raised. Chato kept his bow drawn. I stood between them, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Then a voice called out from the passage. Naiche's voice, speaking English. Sergeant, I am Naiche, chief of this band. I come to speak with you. Do not shoot. He emerged from the passage, his hands raised to show he carried no weapons. Several of his warriors came with him, also unarmed but clearly positioned to fight if needed. Naiche walked calmly across the canyon until he stood beside me. He didn't touch me, didn't look at me, but his presence was solid and reassuring. You want Sarah Mitchell to come with you? Naiche said to the sergeant. I understand this. She is white woman. You think she belongs with white people, but she is also my wife. She has chosen to stay with us. I will not force her to stay if she wants to go, but I will also not let you take her against her will. The sergeant's lip curled. Your wife? You can't marry a white woman. You're not even human beings in the eyes of the law. I saw Naiche's jaw tighten, but his voice remained calm. We are human beings. We breathe same air, bleed same blood, love our children same as you love yours. That you do not see this does not make it less true. I don't have time for philosophy, the sergeant said. I have orders, and my orders say any white captives found in Apache camps are to be rescued, by force if necessary. Then you must kill me first, Naiche said simply, because I will not let you take my wife by force. The soldier shifted nervously. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. Killing an unarmed chief to rescue a woman who didn't want to be rescued. I made a decision. Sergeant, I said, I'll make you a deal. Let me stay here for 1 month. At the end of that month, I'll come out and you can ask me again if I want to leave. If I say yes, I'll go with you willingly. If I say no, you'll leave us alone. 1 month to prove to you that I'm here by choice and that what we're building here is real. The sergeant frowned. How do I know they won't kill you in that month? How do I know you're safe? Because I'll send messages, I said. Every week, I'll come to this spring and leave a note telling you I'm all right. If I miss a week, or if the note seems forced, then you can come back. But until then, you leave this place alone." He considered this, clearly torn between his orders and the reality of the situation. Finally, he said, "I want to talk to you alone, Miss Mitchell, without your husband listening." Naiche tensed, but I touched his arm briefly. "It's all right. I'll be fine." I walked with the sergeant to the far side of the canyon, out of earshot of the others. "Miss Mitchell," he said quietly, "are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we leave, I don't know if we can come back for you. This canyon might be impossible to find again." "I'm sure," I said. "Sergeant, I know this looks insane from the outside. Trust me, I know. But something is happening here that's bigger than me. These people are dying out. Not just from war, but from losing their culture, their identity. If I can help preserve even a small part of that, if I can help bridge the gap between our peoples even in this one small place, then it's worth staying." He studied my face for a long moment. "You really believe that?" "I do." He sighed deeply. "Your father is with the wagon train. They're camped about 20 miles northwest of here waiting for news." "Should I tell him you're alive?" My heart clenched. "Yes. Please tell him I'm alive and well. Tell him—" I swallowed hard. "Tell him I love him and Mama and Thomas. Tell him I found something important here, something worth doing. Tell him I'll come see them when I can, but right now this is where I need to be." The sergeant nodded slowly. "He's not going to understand. I know, but maybe someday he will." We walked back to where the others waited. The sergeant looked at his men, at Naiche and the Apache warriors, and at me. Then he lowered his rifle. "1 month," he said firmly. 4 weekly messages. If we don't get them, we're coming back with a full company. Understood?" "Understood," I said. He gestured to his men. "Mount up. We're heading back." As the soldiers filed out of the canyon, several of them shot looks at me, some sympathetic, some disgusted, all confused. I stood with Naiche and watched them go. When the last soldier had disappeared and we were alone again, Naiche finally turned to me. "You could have gone with them. Could have gone back to your family." "I know," I said quietly. "Why did you stay?" I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd been forced into a prophesied marriage, who'd shown me mercy and patience and respect. This man who'd been willing to die rather than let me be taken against my will. "Because I made you a promise," I said. "I told you I was coming back, and because—" I took a breath. "Because this is where I'm supposed to be right now. I feel it. This work we're doing, building understanding between our peoples. It matters. It matters more than my comfort or my safety or even my family." He reached out and touched my face gently, his dark eyes searching mine. "You are very brave, Sarah Mitchell. Or very foolish," I said with a shaky laugh. "Perhaps both," he smiled slightly. "But I am grateful. My people are grateful. You truly are the bridge." We walked back through the passages to the village together. When we emerged, the entire community was waiting anxiously. When they saw us both return safely, a cheer went up. Sahale ran to embrace me, crying and laughing at the same time. Kimi grabbed my hands and spun me around. Even Dolly approached, and though her expression was still guarded, she nodded once, a gesture of respect, if not quite acceptance. That night, as Naiche and I sat in our wiki-up, he said quietly, "You gave up your family for us today." "Not forever," I said. "Just for now. The sergeant is going to tell them I'm alive. That's enough for the moment." "Is it?" His voice was gentle. "Is it truly enough, Sarah?" I thought about my mother's face, my father's laugh, my brother's teasing smile, thought about all the things I'd left behind and might never have again. "It has to be," I said finally. "Because if I can make this work, if I can help your people survive and preserve their culture while also building peace with mine, then it's worth the sacrifice, isn't it?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was thick with emotion. "I do not know if one person can carry such burden, even person chosen by prophecy." "Then it's a good thing I'm not doing it alone," I said, meeting his eyes. "You're carrying it too. We both are." He reached out and took my hand, the first time he'd done so since our wedding night. His grip was warm and strong. "Then we carry it together," he said quietly. And in that moment, with our hands joined and our futures uncertain, I felt something shift between us. Not love, not yet, but partnership, understanding, a shared commitment to something larger than ourselves. I'd given up my family for now. I'd given up my old life. I'd given up the certainty of who Sarah Mitchell was supposed to be. But in exchange, I'd gained a purpose, a mission, a chance to actually change things instead of just surviving them. Whether I was strong enough to fulfill that mission remained to be seen. But with Naiche beside me, I was willing to try. The cost of bridging 2 worlds was high. But the alternative, letting those worlds destroy each other, was infinitely higher, and I would pay whatever price was necessary to prevent that, even if it meant losing everything I'd once held dear. The weeks following my encounter with the cavalry were the most challenging of my life. Every 7 days, I made the journey to the sacred spring to leave a note for the sergeant, proving I was alive and well. Each time, I wrote carefully chosen words that would reassure him without revealing too much about the village or its people. I am well. I am safe. I am here by choice. This work matters. Week after week, the same simple message. But the notes were the easy part. The hard part was living up to the role I'd claimed for myself. Being a bridge between two worlds sounded noble in theory. In practice, it meant constant translation, constant mediation, constant balancing of conflicting values and perspectives. It meant explaining to Dolly why white settlers weren't all evil invaders, while simultaneously explaining to myself why the Apache had every right to resist the destruction of their way of life. It meant teaching Apache children English words while learning Apache stories. It meant honoring both cultures without betraying either one. And it meant navigating my complicated relationship with Naiche. We'd grown closer over those weeks, talking late into the night, sharing meals, working side by side on village tasks. He taught me to track animals, to read signs in the desert, to understand the complex web of relationships between plants and weather and seasons. I taught him to read English better, to understand the thinking behind white settlers' actions, to see my people as something more than just an invading force. But we still hadn't consummated our marriage. He'd kept his word about giving me time, and I was grateful for that. Yet I was also increasingly aware that the village was watching us, wondering when we'd truly become husband and wife, when I'd bear children who would unite the bloodlines. The pressure was subtle but constant. On the morning of the 4th week, just days before my month-long trial would end, I woke to find Naiche already gone. Sahale was sitting by the fire, her expression troubled. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting up quickly. She gestured toward the village entrance and said something in Apache that I'd learned meant trouble coming. I dressed quickly and went outside. A group of warriors had gathered near the central fire, talking urgently. When I approached, several of them fell silent, eyeing me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Naiche stood at the center of the group, his face grave. When he saw me, he said something in Apache to the others, then came over to me. "There is problem," he said in English. "Big problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" He led me away from the group, toward the edge of the village where we could talk privately. "Scout says cavalry is coming. Not the same soldiers from before. Different group, more of them. And they are not coming to Sacred Canyon. They are coming here, to this village." "How?" I demanded. "How did they find us?" "We do not know, but they will be here by tomorrow, maybe sooner." He gripped my shoulders, his eyes intense. "Sarah, you must go. Must leave now. If they find you here, if they think we kept you against your will." "I'm not leaving," I said firmly. "Sarah? No, listen to me." I grabbed his arms. "If I leave now, it proves nothing. It makes everything I've said about being here by choice look like a lie. But if I'm here when they arrive, if I stand with your people and tell them the truth, maybe I can prevent bloodshed. Or maybe you will be caught in the middle of it," he said harshly. "You could die. So could you. So could everyone here." I held his gaze. "Naiche, this is what I'm for. This is why the prophecy brought me here. Not to run when things get difficult, but to stand between two worlds and prevent them from destroying each other." He closed his eyes briefly. "You ask me to risk your life. I'm asking you to let me do what I was meant to do." For a long moment, he was silent. Then he pulled me against him in a fierce embrace. The first time he'd held me like that. I could feel his heart pounding, could feel the fear and frustration radiating from him. "If you die," he whistled, "never forget. Then we'd better make sure I don't," trying to sound braver than I felt. He released me and called out orders in Apache. The village erupted into controlled activity. Warriors prepared weapons and planned defensive positions. Women and children were sent to the back passages, deep caves where they could hide if fighting started. Supplies were cached in multiple locations in case we needed to flee suddenly. Throughout it all, I worked alongside everyone else. I helped carry water, gathered medical supplies that Dakota had taught me about, made sure the children understood where to go if they heard the alarm signal. Dolly watched me work, her expression unreadable. Finally, she approached and said something in Apache. When I looked at her blankly, she tried again in halting English. "You stay? Fight with us?" "Yes," I said simply. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She said something else that I didn't understand, but her tone had changed. There was respect in it now, grudging, but real. That night, Naiche and I lay in our wickiup, unable to sleep. He held my hand in the darkness, his thumb rubbing circles on my palm. "Tell me about your family," he said quietly. Tell me about the people you left behind. So I did. I told him about my father's patience, how he could spend hours explaining something to me until I understood, about my mother's gentle strength, the way she could comfort anyone with just a touch, about Thomas, who was desperate to seem grown up, but was still just a boy in so many ways. They sound like good people, Naiche said when I finished. They are. They'd like you, I think, if they could get past their fear long enough to know you. And you? Have you gotten past your fear? It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. Fear of him, fear of this life, fear of becoming someone I didn't recognize. I'm still afraid, I admitted, but not of you. I'm afraid of failing, of not being strong enough to be what everyone needs me to be, of letting people down. He turned toward me in the darkness. You have not failed, Sarah. You have done more than anyone could expect. You have learned our ways, made peace with soldiers, stood with us when you could have left. You have been the bridge. Lines. But has it been enough? If soldiers come tomorrow and people die, what good was any of it? The prophecy did not say the bridge would prevent all suffering, he said quietly. Only that the bridge would give us chance for new path. You have given us that. No matter what happens tomorrow, you have given us that. I turned toward him too, so close I could feel his breath on my face. Naiche, I need to tell you something. In case things go wrong, tell me. When I first came here, I was terrified. I thought you were going to kill me. I thought the prophecy was just an excuse to make me a slave or worse. But you weren't like that. You gave me time, you treated me with respect, you let me choose. I paused, gathering courage. You became my friend. And somewhere along the way, you became more than that. Sarah, I'm not saying I love you. I don't know if what I feel is love or just partnership or gratitude or some combination of everything. But I know that when I think about the future, you're in it. I know that when the soldiers gave me a chance to leave, staying with you felt right. I know that if I die tomorrow, I want you to know that being your wife, really being your wife, not just in ceremony but in heart, that wouldn't be a sacrifice. It would be a choice I'd make gladly. He was quiet for so long I thought I'd said too much, pushed too hard. But then his hand came up to cup my face, his touch gentle. I did not think I could care for white woman, he said softly. Thought prophecy would bring stranger I must tolerate for my people's sake. But you are not stranger anymore, Sarah. You are my wife, my partner, he struggled for the English word. My heart's choice, not spirit's choice. Mine. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Our lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper. A kiss that sealed something between us that words couldn't quite capture. When we finally drew apart, he said, If we survive tomorrow, will you truly be my wife? In all ways? Yes, I whispered. If we survive tomorrow, I'll be yours completely. No more waiting, no more uncertainty. He kissed me again, and this time there was promise in it. Hope for a future that might never come, but that we'd fight for with everything we had. We fell asleep holding each other, finding comfort in simple human warmth as the dawn approached. The soldiers arrived at mid-morning. The scouts spotted them an hour before they reached the village. 50 cavalrymen, far more than before, led by a captain I didn't recognize. Naiche positioned his warriors at strategic points around the village entrance. He wanted to meet the soldiers before they entered, to maintain some control over the situation. I stood beside him, dressed in my Apache clothing, my hair braided, my chin high. When the cavalry came into view, the captain raised his hand to halt his men. He rode forward with just 2 soldiers flanking him, stopping about 30 yards from where we stood. I'm Captain Thomas Hendricks, United States Cavalry, he called out. I'm here for Sarah Mitchell. I was told she's being held in this area. I'm Sarah Mitchell, I called back, stepping forward despite Naiche's attempt to hold me back. And I'm not being held. I'm here by choice. The captain's eyes narrowed as he took in my appearance. Miss Mitchell, I need to speak with you privately, without your captors present. They're not my captors. This is my husband, Chief Naiche, and these are his people. My people now, too. Miss Mitchell, I have orders from the territorial governor himself. All white captives are to be freed and returned to civilization. The sergeant who found you reported that you seemed confused, possibly suffering from the effects of captivity. I'm here to ensure your safe return. And I'm telling you, I don't need to be returned. I'm exactly where I want to be. The captain's expression hardened. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make. You've clearly been influenced by your time in captivity. Once you're back among your own people, properly cared for, you'll understand. I understand perfectly well, I interrupted. I'm 23 years old, Captain. I'm of sound mind and legal age. I have the right to choose where I live and who I marry. And I choose this. You can't marry a savage, the captain said flatly. Such unions have no legal standing. In the eyes of the law, you're a single woman who's been kidnapped and held against her will. Then the law is wrong, I said firmly. Captain, I'm going to walk over to you now. I'm going to do it slowly, with my hands visible, so your men don't shoot. When I reach you, I'm going to tell you everything, and then you're going to make a choice. Enforce orders that will lead to bloodshed, or recognize that something remarkable is happening here and give it a chance to continue. I started walking before Naiche could stop me. I heard him call my name, heard the Apache warriors shift nervously, heard the cavalry soldiers raise their rifles, but I kept walking, slowly and steadily, my hands at my sides, my eyes on the captain. When I reached him, he dismounted and stood before me. Up close I could see he was older than I'd thought, 40 perhaps, with gray at his temples and war-weary eyes. Captain, I said quietly, I know this seems insane. I know it defies everything you've been taught about Indians and captivity and proper behavior for white women, but I need you to listen to me. Really listen. I'm listening, he said, his tone skeptical, but not hostile. These people are dying, not just from war, from losing their identity, their culture, their hope. They've been pushed off their lands, hunted, forced to choose between starvation and fighting, but they don't want to fight anymore. They want to live in peace, preserve their ways, raise their children. This village, this hidden place, it's their last refuge. They've attacked settlers, the captain said, killed people, stolen livestock and supplies. Yes, they have, because they were desperate, because they were starving, because they've watched their people die and their lands taken and their children forced into schools that tried to destroy everything they were. I held his gaze. Captain, I'm not saying everything they've done is right, but I am saying they're human beings trying to survive, and I'm trying to help them find a way to survive without more violence. By marrying their chief? By living as one of them? By being a bridge, I said. By showing both sides that the other isn't the enemy, that we can coexist, that peace is possible. He studied me for a long moment. You really believe that? I do, and I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove it. Give me 6 months. Don't reveal this village's location. Don't force me to leave. Let me continue this work. And if, at the end of 6 months, you think I've failed, then you can come back and do what you think is necessary. And if they attack settlers in the meantime, if they kill people while you're playing at peace, they won't. I'll guarantee it. Any raids, any attacks, any violence at all, and the deal is off. But Captain, they're trying. They're really trying to find another way. Don't destroy them for past actions they took out of desperation. The captain was silent for a long time, his eyes moving from me to the Apache warriors standing ready at the village entrance, then back to me. I could see the conflict on his face. Duty versus mercy, orders versus conscience. Finally, he said, I could be court-martialed for this. I know. My men will think I've gone soft. I know that too. 6 months, he said abruptly, but I want monthly reports. Written reports detailing any incidents, any problems, any signs that you're in danger, or that the Apache are preparing for raids. And Miss Mitchell, if I find out you've been coerced into writing those reports, if I have any reason to believe you're not acting freely, I'm coming back with 3 companies and burning this place to the ground. Understood? Relief washed over me so intensely I almost cried. Understood. Thank you, Captain. Thank you so much. He shook his head slowly. I hope you know what you're doing, Miss Mitchell. I truly do. Because if this goes wrong, you won't be the only one who pays the price. I know. I'll make it work. I promise. He remounted his horse and looked at me one more time. Your father is in Tucson. He's been sick with worry. Will you write to him? Let him know you're truly all right? Yes. I'll include a letter to him in my first report. The captain nodded, then turned his horse and called out to his men. Mount up. We're heading back. There were murmurs of confusion and protest from the soldiers, but they obeyed. As the cavalry turned and began to ride away, I stood there watching them go, hardly able to believe what had just happened. When they were out of sight, I walked back to where Naiche waited. His warriors had lowered their weapons but still looked tense, not quite believing the danger had passed. They are leaving? Naiche asked, as if afraid to trust what he'd seen. They're leaving. We have 6 months to prove this can work. He pulled me against him fiercely, and I heard him say something in Apache that sounded like a prayer of thanksgiving. Around us, the warriors began to cheer. Women and children emerged from the hiding places, crying with relief. We'd survived. The bridge had held. That night, the village held another celebration, this one spontaneous and joyful. All the fear and tension of the past days released in dancing and laughter and food. I was passed from embrace to embrace, everyone wanting to thank me, to touch me, to express their gratitude and relief. Even Dolly approached me, and this time when she spoke, there were tears in her eyes. She said something in Apache, and Dakota translated. She says she was wrong about you. Says you are truly chosen. Says her son is lucky to have such brave wife. I looked at Dolly, seeing not the hostile woman who'd doubted me, but a mother who'd been trying to protect her son and her people. Tell her I'm honored to be her daughter-in-law. Tell her I'll work every day to be worthy of this family. When Dakota translated, Dolly embraced me tightly, and I felt something break loose in my chest. Acceptance, belonging, family. Later, much later, when the celebration had wound down and people had drifted back to their wiki-ups, Naiche and I walked to the edge of the village. The stars were brilliant overhead, the desert night clear and cool. We did it, I said softly. We actually did it. You did it, he corrected. You stood between two armies and made them see each other as human. That is what bridge does. We have 6 months to prove it can last. Then we will prove it. He turned to face me, his hands on my shoulders. Sarah, before, you said something about being my wife in all ways. Did you mean it? My heart began to pound. Yes. Did you? Instead of answering, he took my hand and led me back to our wiki-up. Inside, he lit a small fire, and in its gentle light, I could see the question in his eyes. I'm nervous, I admitted. Is that foolish? No, I am nervous too. He smiled slightly. We have done this backwards. Married first, known each other after. But maybe that is not wrong way. Maybe that is just our way. He was right. Nothing about our relationship had followed normal patterns. Why should this? I reached up and began to unbraid my hair, letting it fall loose around my shoulders. Naiche watched, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Then slowly he reached for me. What happened between us that night was tender and awkward and real. Two people from different worlds trying to become one, fumbling toward understanding, finding connection in touch and warmth and shared vulnerability. When it was over, we lay tangled together, his arm around me, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. Sarah, he said quietly, I know you miss your family. Know you gave up much to be here. But I want you to know, you are not alone. You have family here now. You have me. You have our people. You will always have us. Tears slid down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that it was true. I'd lost one family, but I'd gained another. I'd lost one identity, but I'd built a new one. I'd lost certainty, but I'd found purpose. I know, I whispered, and I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, he said. Hard parts make us who we are. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two bridges that had become one. The next 6 months were not easy. There were challenges, setbacks, moments when I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Teaching Apache children English while preserving their language and culture was a delicate balance. Mediating disputes between tribal members who wanted to raid for supplies and those who wanted to maintain peace required constant diplomacy. Writing monthly reports to Captain Hendricks that were honest, but didn't reveal too much about the village's location or vulnerabilities, tested my creativity. And writing to my family was perhaps the hardest thing of all. I sent letters through the captain, telling them I was alive and well, explaining as best I could why I'd chosen to stay. My father wrote back, his words heavy with hurt and confusion, begging me to come home. My mother's letters were gentler but no less painful, full of concern for my safety and my soul. Thomas sent one letter, just one, that said simply, I don't understand, Sarah, but I hope you're happy. I hope it's worth it. I hoped so too. But as the months passed, I began to see the fruits of my work. The Apache children who were learning English could now communicate with traders, giving the village better access to needed supplies. The warriors who'd wanted to raid were persuaded to try hunting and trading instead, reducing the risk of conflict. And slowly, carefully, I began to build relationships with nearby white settlers who were willing to see the Apache as neighbors rather than enemies. It wasn't perfect. There were incidents. A stolen horse here, a verbal confrontation there. But we managed them. We resolved them. We kept the peace. And in the process, I became truly Apache, not in blood, but in spirit. I learned their stories, their songs, their ways of seeing the world. I participated in their ceremonies, honored their traditions, raised my voice with theirs in celebration and mourning. And I fell in love with Naiche, not the dramatic, overwhelming love of storybooks, but something deeper and more enduring. A love built on partnership and respect and shared struggle. A love that grew stronger with each challenge we faced together. By the end of the 6 months, when Captain Hendricks returned for his final inspection, he found a thriving village where Apache and white traders mingled peacefully, where children played together regardless of background, where the sound of different languages and cultures blended into something new and beautiful. Miss Mitchell, he said, shaking his head in wonder, I don't know how you've done it, but this is remarkable. It's not just me, I said. It's everyone here. Apache and White, working together. That's what makes it work. He nodded slowly. I'll report to the territorial governor that this village poses no threat, that it should be left alone. But Miss Mitchell, the world is changing. More settlers are coming. More pressure for Apache lands. I don't know how long this peace can last. Then we'll make it last as long as we can, I said firmly. And when new challenges come, we'll face them together. That's what bridges do. They stand firm, even when the waters rise. After the captain left, I stood at the edge of the village and looked out over the desert. Somewhere out there, my family was building their new life in California. I hoped they were happy. I hoped they understood, or would someday. But I was building my life here, in this hidden canyon, with these people who'd become my family. And it was a good life, a meaningful life, a life that mattered. Naiche came to stand beside me, slipping his hand into mine. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking about bridges, I said. How they connect two places that seem impossibly far apart. How they let people cross over to meet each other in the middle. How they have to be strong enough to hold up under pressure, flexible enough to sway with the wind, and rooted firmly on both sides. And are you such bridge? I thought about the girl I'd been when I stumbled into that sacred canyon, frightened, lost, clinging to her old identity. And I thought about the woman I'd become, strong, purposeful, embracing a new identity while honoring the old. I'm trying to be, I said. Every single day, I'm trying to be. He squeezed my hand. Then you succeed. Because bridge does not have to be perfect. Bridge just has to stand. And so I stood. Between two worlds. Between two cultures. Between past and future. I was Sarah Mitchell from Missouri, the girl who'd dreamed of adventure. I was Naiche's wife, the woman who'd found purpose in an unexpected place. I was the bridge the prophecy had spoken of, the connection between Apache and White. But most of all, I was myself, not defined by either world, but enriched by both, not lost between two cultures, but found in the space they created together. The sun set over the canyon, painting the rocks in shades of gold and red. Naiche and I stood watching it, his arm around my shoulders, my hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The next month, the next year, would bring more struggles to overcome. But tonight, the bridge stood firm, and that was enough. Years later, when I was old and my children and grandchildren gathered around to hear stories of the past, they would ask me, "Grandmother, do you regret it? Do you regret the choice you made?" And I would tell them, I regret only that I couldn't bring everyone I loved into this life with me. But the choice itself? Never. Because that choice, that moment when I decided to stand between two worlds instead of choosing one over the other, that choice gave me a life worth living. That choice gave me you. My children were living proof that bridges could not only stand, but flourish. They spoke both English and Apache fluently. They honored both cultures. They moved freely between the village and the white settlements, carrying my message of understanding and peace to a new generation. The hidden canyon became, over time, not so hidden. But by then, it didn't need to be. The people who knew of it had learned to see its inhabitants not as enemies, but as neighbors. The peace we'd built, fragile as it had been at first, had taken root and grown. Not everywhere, not completely. The conflicts between Apache and White continued in many places, and there was much suffering I couldn't prevent. But in this one place, in this one community, the bridge stood, and from that one bridge, others were built. And that, in the end, was what the prophecy had meant. Not that I would save everyone or solve everything, but that I would be the first bridge, the proof that such bridges could exist. The rest, the spread of understanding, the growth of peace, the slow transformation of how people saw each other, that was the work of generations. But it started with one lost girl who stumbled into a sacred canyon. It started with one scared woman who chose to stand between two worlds instead of fleeing to safety. It started with one bridge that refused to fall, no matter how strong the winds blew. And in the end, that was prophecy enough.